to that. All right. Welcome everybody to our second webinar in our series on mental health. This is a project that was sponsored by the network of the National Library of Medicine's Middle Atlantic region, and it's through a partner of the All of Us Research Program. The National Institutes of Health All of Us Research Program is basically a citizen science program that allows you to contribute to a huge collection of data for health research that helps doctors and other people learn how to do other things. If you want to learn more about the program, you can visit joinallofus.org/MLM, and I will put that link in the webinar follow-up email. I also wanted to share with you a couple of the resources that are available to you. The first is Medline Plus. This is your Google for health information if you're looking for reliable, easy to understand information on any sort of health topic, including mental health. They have a specific mental health topic. There is no advertisements, there's no endorsements. They do have some links to local services as you dig around in there. So there is a by topic, they have the mental health highlighted here, and I will also share this out after the webinar. And they do have a lot of instructional PDFs that are in other languages. So this is one of the other helpful things on basically if you've lost the instructions on how to use a piece of medical equipment like a nebulizer, as they show here, or your asthma inhaler, Medline Plus can help you find that out. So any developed resources in this project are supported by the National Library of Medicine, National Institutes of Health, and it's our sole responsibility for the content in them. Right, so that takes care of the beginning. I am Erin Joyce. I'm the district consultant for the Oil Creek Library District, covering Clarion, Venango, and Jefferson County. Our speaker today is Kara Raybuck with the Spira Group, and I hope I said Kara right.
Yeah, you did. And also, Erin, I wanted to say I think you cut, I don't know, it cut out on my end. So that whole last part of what you said, maybe was not heard. I'm not sure.
I'll fix it in the recording later. It didn't go through. Okay. It's the benefits of rural broadband in this area. Yeah. I'm telling you. It's great.
So I guess, will you tell me if I cut out or something, or I need to repeat something?
Yes,
okay.
I will do that for you.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to put up our slideshow from Kara. All right, Kara, so you should be up. And let me minimize our screens here.
Okay.
So, are you seeing it?
Well, I'm looking at mine. Do I need to look at yours too?
Just as long as you can see it, we're on the first slide for adolescent mental health.
Yeah, that's good. And I think I can, yeah, that's fine. Okay, so my name is Kara Raybuck, and I am excited to offer some education about adolescent mental health, teen mental health. Just to give you a heads up, like when we're talking about this topic, we're actually talking about kids age 10 to 19. So I think sometimes we think that teen mental health or that mental health happens at a certain age. It can start as young as 10. You could see some symptoms or concerns or behaviors that potentially could be addressed if we're looking for them. So I am a super direct, concise person. So I want you to walk away with skills that you can use immediately to improve all your relationships, not just, those maybe within your home, but that you can offer benefit wherever you are, whether that's workplace or wherever. So I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I have worked with school age children since 2009 in different capacities, TSS, mobile therapy, and then on and off since 2013, I've actually worked in the school doing some school-based therapy. And so that has been a way for me to communicate.
All right, Kara, I think you cut out again.
One more.
So you just came back in at one more, so there we go. You cut out, so if you want to restart with this slide.
Okay, that's okay. I haven't started with this slide yet. I just wanted to make sure that at least you and I knew where we were. Okay, so a lot of times when we talk about mental health, we talk about all these statistics and they sound scary. And I don't necessarily think that statistics are all that helpful when we're talking about the nuts and bolts of helping your children or loved ones in regards to mental health. But 1 in 5 people experience at least one mental health situation. And I call it a situation because I think sometimes we feel like this mental health struggle that we have for a period of time is going to last forever. And I think that when we talk about it being a situation that's forever changing, there's hope in that. There's hope that we're not just stagnant and stuck with a situation and feeling as though we can't do anything about it. So I think mental health comes and goes, and I think it's a situation, and it looks different from person to person. And it does depend on your age in that it could look differently for a 10-year-old versus an 18-year-old, but it might not. So I want to focus on why this age of folks are impacted and how we can support kids that fit this age range. So why mental health impacts teens? One part of it is brain development. So our brain develops for a long time, right? Like up to age 25, it's still growing and changing, and there's a lot of things that can happen that impact that. And there could be parts of our brain that actually develop more quickly than others, and that creates some incongruence. So imagine being a teen or a child who is experiencing that, and how frustrating that can be, and how frustrating it can be for parents to be thinking like, I know that my kid knows better than that. I know they would not make that decision. Like, who is this person? I know they would not do this, right? And so it's important to remember that some of that they don't necessarily have control over, right? We don't always necessarily get to decide how quickly different parts of our brain develop. And so when you think about transitions for kids that fit in this age range, you think about like work, what kind of job they want to do, going to college, living on their own. There's a lot of transitions that happen for them specifically. But if you kind of expand your lens a little bit and consider the transitions maybe happening within your home, dad's getting a different job, we're moving, those types of things that also can be piled on, and taking those things into consideration and how that might be impacting your child. And hormones also, and identity. So what I want to say about identity is kids, they're trying to figure out who they are. Who do I want to be? Who do my parents think I am? And how do I kind of balance all of that and keep everybody happy? I don't know if in your house, at least not, sometimes I forget to have that conversation, like what are you working for? What are you trying to do? And are you doing it for you versus trying to keep the balance and keep everyone else happy? Hormones are different for everyone. So just taking it into consideration when you're having these conversations with your teens. The other thing is school culture. So public schools are offering a ton of education about mental health. I don't know about right now. I mean, COVID and virtual schooling and all of that, it could look differently. Um, but they have the resources to offer a ton of education. So as a parent, partnering with them would be very beneficial. Um, and recognizing that mental health concerns in those concrete buildings are rampant, right? A guidance counselor is equipped to make recommendations for therapists or other health support. Um, and I recognize this is difficult for some parents for various reasons, but I'll discuss some of those in a few minutes. But being open to the idea that the guidance counselors or specific teachers or other folks at your child's school are invested and want to offer support and help. So some of the examples of teen mental health that we kind of throw around would be depression, anxiety, ADHD, substance abuse, and suicidal thoughts. And half of these mental health situations are experienced by the age of 14, and then they're undetected and untreated for potentially years, right? And so just to mention something about suicide, it's the third leading cause of death for ages 15 to 19. And if you think about that idea that I had mentioned, we're starting to have these conversations or look for these things by age 10. If no one recognizes some of these concerns when a child is 10, and developmentally they're not at a place where they can explain how they're feeling, what's happening for them, you could see how we get, by age 15, we get to a really dark place for some kids. And what I want to say about ADHD and trauma, they're similar, right? Like the symptoms of ADHD and trauma are very similar. And trauma used to be defined as something really terrible that has happened. But when we really look at trauma, my trauma looks nothing like your trauma. And the degree to which I'm impacted by potentially the same situation that happened to you can be very widespread and very different. So what that means is if we aren't aware that we're even impacted by something that happened 3 years ago, we can't adjust or grow through it. When you think of ADHD symptoms, the inability to focus, that could be because of something that happened 3 years ago. Did this child always have symptoms of ADHD, or did that start when an event happened 3 years ago? And you don't necessarily, I know medication is sometimes not something folks want to talk about, but if it's trauma, medication potentially is not a form of treatment, or at least an initial form of treatment. But the idea that a child could be fidgety or unable to sit still, and we see this far into 15, 16, that idea that kids can still struggle to sit still, and it could be trauma. It might not be ADHD. And I could go on about some of the symptoms and how those are very similar. But it could lead to children who start to struggle academically, right? And then you start questioning, my child has always done well in school. Why are they struggling now? So really knowing how your child reacts to situations and what those situations even are. And it could be something, this is the example that I always use, but just they witnessed a fight at school. So how, kind of helping your child process through like their involvement, their impact in that situation, so that it doesn't continue to be something that negatively impacts them for years to come. Sorry, I lost my spot here. But if you were open to the idea of therapy for your child or encourage that for them, would you be giving your child problem solving, resilience skills along the way through that process that would kind of carry through with them for the rest of their life? And I think that's a positive thing. And for the parents who are like, yes, I encourage therapy, I'm, maybe you go to therapy yourself, those types of things, kudos to you, because that seems to be a huge barrier for some parents. As far as substance abuse goes, there's a lot, vaping, juuling, alcohol, cigarettes, and of course, the more serious substances such as marijuana and so on. But as a parent, I think it's really important to stay connected to your community so that you know who's involved in these things, which parents, which of your child's peers, and kind of facing that head on with your child, having a realistic conversation about why potentially, these are not the folks that you want to be spending your time with. So what are you looking for as far as recognizing if your child does struggle with mental health? And as you look through that list, you could be thinking, oh my gosh, that's me half the time. And in some of these situations, it is difficult for parents because you kind of find yourself turning the mirror on yourself as far as maybe what we've modeled or what has been normal in our households. But if just having the conversation with your teens about what's going on, we teach them, right? We teach them the skills to manage these situations, and then it's not a mental health situation. And these mental health situations that kind of happen along the way as we transition, and they're less frequent, right? So we see less irritability, we see fewer anger outbursts, less isolation. Maybe there's actually an increase in motivation. So I do recognize that it's a difficult conversation sometimes because we maybe recognize that we and that's, it's actually not the case. And so how do we respond and help, right? So if we can equip our kids with the ability to communicate, the rest will come, right? And as adults, sometimes we're not always great at it. And that's okay, right? We can grow with our kids while we're kind of guiding and empowering them through some of these difficult situations. And the idea that the lack of communication could be the cause of the situation, that goes back to that brain development idea that if kids are not to that point yet where they completely understand and process information in a way that they can do something with it, you get stuck. And so that's where they need us, right, as parents, to kind of continue down that path with them and help them develop those skills. The anxiety piece of mental health sometimes seems to come from the academics and the idea that kids are putting a ton of pressure and stress on themselves, whether that comes from us as parents or not. And just the pressure of the world, and to be successful and whatever. But I think if having that conversation too, does your child feel like they have to do really great in school? They're, and maybe you never even told them they had to, but they're putting that pressure on themselves for whatever reason. And so being able to have that conversation that, C's get degrees too, right? Like that's the motto in my house. Um, and also, I think for a lot of students, they are having this conversation in school, right? Like they're having the conversation of how does stress impact your academics and then ultimately your mental health. It's a hot topic. They're hearing it at school. They may have a better understanding of why they're impacted than you do as a parent, right? And that's okay. But know that your kids know someone who has been hospitalized due to a mental health situation, or that they attend therapy regularly, right? So being able to sit down and kind of have these conversations with your child and what they believe could be beneficial or helpful for them, and then supporting that. So communication with those who know our kids, and it sounds so simple, right? It's just communicate effectively and things will improve, right? But there's a lot of stigma for parents and even school districts, I think, um, to kind of come together and problem solve this for teens, or to be a support for them. And parents sometimes feel like they're failing, um, and you're not. Like, I have found that districts, actually, teachers, guidance counselors, whoever, actually respond better when you are just straight up and honest, right? Like when I say, listen, we are functioning train wrecks at my house, you know, they get on board. Like they want to support and help you, and you'll find that like they would say the same thing. So nobody is judging your parenting or lack thereof. we're we're all in this together. But those folks who spend on a normal year, not a pandemic year, 7 hours or however many hours it is in a school day with your child, they probably can offer some insight. They can probably offer some support and encouragement for you. And I'm not saying that they know our kids better. I'm saying they see them differently than we do in our home when we're rushing in to get dinner ready after work and after school and whatever. So partnering with guidance counselors and teachers and friends of our kids and friends as parents and coaches and whoever else might be involved is a really positive thing. But if we can normalize that awareness of mental health and the train wreck part of it, we all support each other, right? Like there's not that judgment, and it is very just normal that these situations can happen. Let's adjust and adapt and grow through them and come out stronger on the other side. I think that's the other piece, that after we go through some of these situations, we're stronger on the other side, right? And we develop those problem solving skills and that resilience, and it carries on through their adulthood also. So things to model and encourage. So these are kind of the simple things, right? Like moving your body, like doing that with your child, walking, people always say, when you're talking to your child in the car, they can't get away from you. But walking outside too, they're probably not going to want to walk away from you, right? Like they recognize and see you as someone who can encourage and support them. And having a conversation with your teen about what are some of the coping skills that they already have that maybe they've learned about at school, or from peers, just hearing other folks' struggles, things like that. And then you being able to offer like what works best for you. What did you do to get through some of these stressful, difficult transitions, whatever it might be, that can help your child. And for some kids, I think too, they would potentially identify things like art, when I'm in school and I'm doing art, like that's helpful to me, and those types of things. So how do you encourage those things at home right now during a pandemic if they're not going to school face to face and maybe they don't have art class at that point? And so increasing awareness, and I put on there, I'm kind of talking to you, and again that goes back to that whole turning the mirror on our self thing, because we can model some of these things for our kids just every day, just a normal part of everyday life. So paying attention to our own self-talk, um, the social media thing, I'll come back to in a second, surrounding yourself with healthy people, and um, that idea of we're the sum of the five people we spend the most time with, you know, that's pretty powerful. When you say that to a teenager, you know, and they have this group of friends, and you really look into that, are they surrounding themselves with folks who add value to them and that they add value to? um and boundaries, of course. You know, we see a lot of teens who are kind of picking up other people's things and putting them in their backpack to carry around, and sometimes it's ours as parents. Our kids are picking up our stuff and putting it in their backpack and carrying it around, and it's heavy, and they have no control over it. They don't necessarily have the ability to do anything about it, but they want to help, they want to do something about it, and so they're picking these heavy things up and carrying it around with them. And so if we're having regular conversations about like what we are doing as parents to manage ourselves and our own mental health, we're giving them the skills to do so as well. And some of the things that I have found that are helpful for kids in this age range, one is it's called a Dailyo journal app. And as a parent, you could download it also, and you could track your moods and compare it with your teens and have conversations about, you know, this event happened and this is how it impacted me, and I don't want it to impact me. It wasn't something that I had any control over. The next one that I have on there, and I love this one. It's called a Wreck This journal, and so it you write in it, of course, but then you also are like destroying it at the same time. So it's yours, you know, and there's a ton of conversation starters in there and activities that would really grow your relationship with your child and understanding where they're coming from as they're working through that journal. And then the social media thing that I said I would come back to, just increasing their awareness of how they feel when they're looking at some of this social media. Is it causing jealousy? Is it making them question who they are? Is it causing a decrease in their self-confidence? And have these conversations. Help them decide to limit some of that social media exposure. And then, you know, praise them for that good for you for, you know, kind of crawling out of that gutter and not continuing to be a part of something that doesn't add value to you. And the last thing that I want to say, and if this is the only thing that you find value in what I've said today, so I'm good with that. But if you encourage your child to speak to someone else or to spend time with somebody else who may be able to help them, and I'm, you know, talking therapy wise, and maybe it's because they don't want to hurt you and they're afraid that what they want to talk about is going to hurt you. You are an amazing parent in my book. If you are willing to be like, I will do whatever I can do to support you so that you can be well, then I want to do that. I appreciate that so much. And then also, I think most parents at this stage of the game are of the mindset, or, you know, mental health just looked different before. We didn't talk about it as much as our kids talk about it now. We weren't aware of it like our kids are aware of it now. And so just being open-minded about that and giving kids that outlet, I think is huge. And I think it leads to improving relationships for your child for years to come, you know, and across the board, not just your relationship with them, but their relationships with others in their life. And so, Erin, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to do this and to get the word out. And I'm willing to be a support for parents in any capacity. And so This was great. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you for doing this for us, Kara. One of the things I wanted to make sure to point out is that telehealth is an option. I know your office provides that service. So being able to do a video chat with a therapist is fairly common. It's often covered by insurance. And that way, if your teen is not comfortable talking to somebody in this area, as I know as a teen, I would not have been comfortable talking to somebody from my hometown. And you can't drive them an hour away to another therapist. There are often telehealth options. So.
Yes, and kids are FaceTiming, right? Like they're Snapchatting. It's kind of just a different form of communication that kids these days are pretty comfortable with.
So moving on to some of our questions. What would be the line for you to saying this is something that we can handle in-house, or that we have to go get help for it? And if you have to go get help, where would be your first person or your first step to try?
So I, maybe not in the situation that the world is in right now, but I would say initially I would have said a guidance counselor, or if your child was somebody who reached out to a guidance counselor, if the guidance counselor knows their situation and they've talked several times, maybe that would be where you start. But also the idea that you reach out to a therapist, like you're not locked in for life, right? So even if it was a situation where you and your child went one time or two times, just to kind of open that door and start that communication, I think therapy is kind of one of those things where you can do it at different parts of your life. And if you're already established, you maybe don't go for a period of time, but then life happens again, because we all know that's how it goes, right? And you may go back. And I think just kind of letting kids see that as like normal, right? Like you go, you get the help you need, and then you're good for a period of time, right? And then also developing that awareness of knowing when you're not good, like when do I need to go back, and if I need to go back.
Say you're not a parent, you don't have that therapy option available to you to help that teen. You're a friend or a grandparent or a other close adult. What are some of your advice for helping the teens in your life stay mentally healthy?
So I think you could still normalize that idea of therapy, right? And to be able to say, oh, my child went, or this is who my child talked to. And then also their friends, if you're maybe not reaching out to a professional, what about some of your child's friends or their parents, as far as kind of discussing things that are maybe going on in their life or that they're struggling with, just to get a better understanding of what it is? Because again, communication seems to be a kind of at the root sometimes for a lot of us. And so maybe they have a friend who communicates better and can explain the situation differently, and just kind of getting everybody on the same page. And then maybe you do handle it in-house at that point. But to know that, like, if you feel like you've exhausted all your efforts and you need something more, there is more available as far as helping your teens.
Kind of going back to that modeling, the modeling of healthy behaviors, it's kind of easier to model healthy eating and healthy like moving around, exercise, things like that. How about normalizing past struggles with mental health or going through what you've been through? I know in our culture, it's one of those things we don't talk about. What would you say as a parent, like how, or as a friend, like how would you talk about it without sort of crossing an inappropriate line?
And
or
so as a parent, I don't know that there's necessarily there would be such a concern for that inappropriate line. You know what I mean? If you're just sharing your past experiences and whatever, whether it was depression, whether it was anxiety, whether it was, just processing through grief or losing someone, I think our kids are far more resilient than maybe parents always give them credit for. And I think they can hear some of those things, right? Like they're exposed to, even just on social media, the amount of real life, huge, heavy things that our kids are exposed to. I'm pretty confident they can handle having a conversation about something that you have had to go through, or what that looked like. What were some of the skills that you developed because you dealt with this? um, I don't see a ton of fear in it being too real. I think our kids see a whole different world than we saw at their age, and I think recognizing that is important, and recognizing like where they are developmentally, and they still are seeing this heavy stuff that's happening in our world, and developmentally they're not there yet. So we have to have those conversations with them to kind of prepare them and guide them and help them through that.
Is there a time when you should not intervene and just say, oh, this is just normal teen stuff, and not say something?
I think you can, well, I always say something, right? I don't think you can, unless you're being pushy or overbearing. I think you can always mention it. You can always say, hey, I noticed this. Are you okay? I just wanted to check in with you. That's not overbearing, right? And I think that that's probably happening in a school situation anyways. So kids are potentially prepared for that, or they're not taken aback by somebody checking in on them.
Yeah, one of my personal pet peeves is when people brush off being irritable, especially as a woman, on like PMS or something like that. And I'm like, it's always better to start asking those questions, because in my experience, often the mental health issues I have had have always been driven by a physical condition. I know I have struggled with depression in relation to birth control. I don't struggle with it on an everyday basis, but I'm very sensitive to birth control. And I was talking to a parent friend of mine. Her daughter was really like kind of going off the rails. And I was like, is she on birth control? Turns out that was the problem. And because they had never checked in.
Conversation.
Yeah.
Of a conversation, it was just with a friend. It was not, it didn't necessarily have to be a professional, but like, had they even had that conversation at the doctor's office maybe, and no one, wasn't mentioned, nobody thought of that. And so I think that's the other reason to communicate well. And you never know, right? Like really having positive relationships, and everybody's probably gone through it already. You know what I mean? Like everything that could potentially happen, there's probably somebody who's already survived that. And why not reach out? Why not at least hear the information? And that was it was just saying, oh, is she on birth control? Which sounds like nothing and no big deal at all. But I'm imagining for that child, that was probably pretty impactful to change that, to take something else, or to not take birth control.
Yeah, I know the mom said it was less than a week that her whole outlook had turned around.
And that's life-changing.
Yeah, so I mean, I think ending that stigma and starting to talk about it in ways that you're comfortable with, I'm with you on that. I really like how you talk about how it's a situation and it's not an ongoing. There are people who will struggle with anxiety or depression or whatever their mental health situation is for a longer period of time, but
but there's hope in knowing that it potentially they won't, right? Like you might as well, if you're 15 and we're starting to have this conversation, we might as well talk about it from a hopeful standpoint versus a hopeless standpoint.
I appreciate your time today. I know my children are on the not the teenage side yet. My oldest is 7, and we've dealt with things with them that I never thought I would have to. So this has been helpful and very hopeful, and I appreciate the perspective. For those of you watching the recording later, we're going to have some resources going up on our Overdrive account for parents and for teens, for parents going through some of these situations. We can't do the Reckitt journal. I did look, but I can't even get like something you could look at and do on your own.
Okay.
But there are some other ones. We also put the resources up from the last webinar, the Managing Depression and Anxiety. One of the resources on that is an anxiety art journal, which I think is along the same lines as sort of tapping into some of those alternative pathways to our mind, getting us, stepping us back and seeing where it is. So thank you very much for your time. I will send out all of the resources that we have in a follow-up email, and we will see you guys later. Thank you, Kara.
Thank you.